The air in Family Courtroom 3B was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and simmering animosity. At the plaintiff's table sat Jameson Pratt, a man whose net worth was discussed in financial journals, a confident smirk playing on his lips. Beside him, his mistress Giselle looked every bit the victor, her hand resting possessively on his arm. They were the picture of triumph. Across the aisle, Katrina Pratt sat alone, a ghost in her own life story, her face pale, her spirit seemingly crushed under the weight of public humiliation and legal maneuvering. Jameson glanced at her, a flicker of pity mixed with disdain in his eyes. He thought this was the final act, the simple signing of papers that would discard his past. But what he didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that the quiet, unassuming woman on the bench, Judge Anya Sharma, was holding a manila folder. And inside that folder was a secret, powerful enough to turn his victory into a life-shattering detonation. Life with Jameson Pratt had always been a performance. Katrina Davenport, a quiet librarian with a love for first editions and rainy afternoons, had been swept into his orbit a decade ago. He was a force of nature, a tech mogul who had built an empire from a garage startup. He saw her at a charity auction, bidding on a rare collection of poetry, and was captivated by what he called her quiet authenticity. Their marriage was for years the gold standard among their affluent social circle in Austin, Texas. Katrina learned to navigate the glittering galas, the strategic dinner parties, and the relentless paparazzi. She became the perfect corporate wife, elegant, supportive, and discreet. Their sprawling mansion, a modern marvel of glass and steel overlooking Lake Travis, was her gilded cage. She curated the art, managed the household staff, and chaired the charities that burnished the Pratt corporate image. She loved Jameson, or at least she loved the man he had been in the beginning. The one who would find her in the library, wrap his arms around her, and whisper that she was the only real thing in his world. But over the last 2 years, that man had been slowly disappearing, replaced by a stranger who wore his face. The change was subtle at first. Business trips to Singapore and Zurich became more frequent and lasted longer. Phone calls were taken in hushed tones on the terrace. He started locking his phone, something he'd never done before. When she'd gently inquired, he'd laughed it off. Industrial espionage cat. Paranoia is the price of success. Then came the scent, a cloying, sweet perfume, nothing like her own light, citrusy fragrance that clung to his suits when he returned from his trips. He'd blame it on enthusiastic European colleagues. They greet you with a kiss on both cheeks, darling. It's their culture. Katrina tried to believe him. The alternative was a chasm she wasn't ready to face. Their life was a meticulously constructed edifice, and to admit a crack would be to risk bringing the whole thing down. She was the anchor, the calm center of his chaotic world. That was her role. That was their bargain. The first concrete piece of evidence arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet whir of a printer. Jameson had asked her to print a presentation from his briefcase for an early morning meeting. As the pages slid out, a final sheet, printed by mistake, came with them. It was a hotel confirmation. The Four Seasons in Paris. The dates coincided with his supposed tech conference in Berlin. The reservation was for a King Suite double occupancy. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It could be a mistake, an assistant's error. She looked at the name on the reservation, J. Pratt. Room service charges were itemized at the bottom. 2 orders of champagne and strawberries, a charge from the hotel's lingerie boutique. Breakfast for 2 every morning for 4 days. She stood there in the silent, cavernous study at 2 a.m., the paper trembling in her hand. The cold, hard reality of it was undeniable. He wasn't just cheating. He was living a second parallel life. The man who slept in her bed, who kissed her goodnight, was a liar. She didn't confront him. What would she say? He would deny it, twist it, and make her feel like the crazy one. He was a master of manipulation, a skill that had served him well in the boardroom, and she now realized in their home. Instead, a cold resolve began to settle in her soul. She needed more. She needed undeniable proof, something his silver tongue couldn't explain away. Her friend, Marua Sanchez, a fiery criminal defense attorney she'd known since college, was her only confidant. They met for coffee at a small, out-of-the-way cafe, far from the prying eyes of their social set. "Kat, you have to get out," Maria said, her voice firm but laced with concern after Katrina laid out her suspicions. "This man is going to hollow you out until there's nothing left. I can't just leave, Maria. We've built a life. There are company shares in my name, charitable foundations." "He built an empire," Maria corrected gently. "You decorated the palace while he entertained his court. There's a difference. He has a prenuptial agreement, doesn't he?" Katrina nodded, a feeling of dread washing over her. She vaguely remembered signing it a week before their lavish wedding. She was 24, deliriously in love, and Jameson's lawyers had presented it as a mere formality, a way to protect his existing company assets. Her own lawyer, a young man recommended by Jameson's firm, had given it a cursory glance and told her it was standard. "Get me a copy of that prenup," Maria said, her eyes hardening. "And we need to find out who she is. A name, a face, something concrete. Because right now, your suspicions are just smoke. In a divorce court against a man like Jameson Pratt, you need a cannon." Katrina began to watch, to listen. She became a detective in her own home. It was a soul-destroying exercise. She noticed a new corporation under the Pratt umbrella, Dubois Holdings International. The name felt foreign, personal. She did a quick search. The CEO was a woman named Giselle Dubois. The photos that appeared were of a stunning raven-haired woman, at least 10 years younger than Katrina, with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper smile. She was often pictured at industry events, standing just a little too close to Jameson. The final devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place one evening when Jameson was in the shower. His phone left on the nightstand buzzed. A message lit up the screen, a preview visible even on the locked display. From Giselle J. Just saw the photos from the gallery opening. She looked so tired. "Poor thing. Can't wait for you to be free. I have a surprise for you tonight. Wear the blue tie I bought you." Katrina felt the air leave her lungs. She looked so tired. Poor thing. The casual cruelty, the condescending pity, it was more painful than a scream. She wasn't just being replaced. She was being pitied by her replacement. In that moment, the love she had clung to, the hope she had nurtured, that this was all a terrible misunderstanding, died. It withered and turned to ash, and in its place, a cold, hard resolve formed. She would not be the poor thing. She would not be a footnote in the story of Jameson Pratt. She would fight. She took a photo of the message with her own phone. Then she went to her closet, found the safe hidden behind a false panel, and retrieved the copy of her prenuptial agreement. The next morning, she called Maria. "I have the prenup," she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "And I have a name. Giselle Dubois." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Okay," Kat Maria said softly. "Okay. The war has begun." The confrontation was colder and more brutal than Katrina could have ever imagined. She chose to do it not in a fit of rage, but with calculated precision. She waited until a Sunday morning, a time that had once been theirs, filled with newspapers, coffee, and lazy conversation. She sat across from him, at the polished mahogany table, in their sun-drenched breakfast nook. She placed her phone on the table between them, the photo of Giselle's text message glowing on the screen. Jameson glanced at it, and for a fleeting second, a flicker of panic crossed his face. It was gone almost instantly, replaced by a mask of weary annoyance. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize. He simply sighed as if she were a tedious business problem that needed to be managed. "Katrina, let's not be dramatic," he said, taking a slow sip of his espresso. "Things change. People evolve. We've had a good run, but we're just not on the same path anymore." The sheer audacity of his dismissal stole her breath. "A good run, Jameson. We are married. This is my life. You made vows to me. Vows are for romantics. We are adults. This arrangement has benefited you tremendously," he said, his voice taking on a sharp corporate edge. "You've lived a life of extraordinary privilege. I've given you everything. I gave you 10 years of my life," her voice cracked the raw emotion, finally breaking through her composure. "I supported you. I stood by you. I managed this entire world you built, so you could be free to conquer it. And you repay me by sleeping with another woman and having her pity me." He finally looked at her, his eyes as cold and grey as a winter storm. "Don't be naive. This is how the world works. Giselle understands me. She's part of my world in a way you never could be. She's ambitious. She's like me." That was the deepest cut. He wasn't just leaving her for another woman. He was leaving her for a better version of himself. He was rendering Katrina and everything she stood for obsolete. "I want a divorce," she said, the words tasting like poison. He nodded, a thin, cruel smile touching his lips. "I agree. In fact, my lawyer Brenda Holloway has already drawn up the initial papers. It will be clean, quick, and based entirely on the terms of our prenuptial agreement." The name Brenda Holloway sent a chill down her spine. Holloway was a shark, a high-profile divorce attorney known for eviscerating her opponents on the stand. Jameson hadn't just been cheating, he had been planning his exit strategy for months. "You'll be well taken care of course," he continued, magnanimous in his victory. "The agreement stipulates a one-time payment of $1 million plus the condo in the city. A generous severance package, you could say." $1 million. It sounded like a fortune to the librarian she once was, but it was less than the cost of the art on their walls. It was a pittance, a crumb from the vast fortune she had helped him build and maintain, a fortune valued at over $500 million. "This is my home, Jameson. It's a corporate asset, Katrina, and it's time for you to vacate it." The cruelty was breathtaking. He stood up, adjusted his cashmere sweater, and walked out of the room without a backward glance, leaving her alone with the wreckage of their life. The next few weeks were a blur of humiliation. Jameson moved out, but Giselle moved in. Not into the main house, but into the public sphere. They were photographed together at charity balls. Katrina was supposed to have co-chaired on yachting trips with friends who had once been hers, their hands intertwined, their smiles radiant. The society pages and gossip blogs painted a sordid narrative. The dynamic tech titan, freed from his staid, boring marriage, had found a vibrant new partner. Katrina was erased, painted as a relic of his past. Her lawyer, Samuel Rodriguez, a seasoned and shrewd attorney Maria had recommended, didn't sugarcoat the situation when they met in his modest, book-lined office. He was the antithesis of the slick Brenda Holloway. He was patient, methodical, and his eyes held a deep, weary understanding of human cruelty. He spread the prenuptial agreement across his desk. "This is a nasty piece of work, Katrina," he said, his fingers tracing the dense clauses. "It was drafted by the best corporate lawyers money can buy. It waives your rights to almost all marital property, including any appreciation in the value of his company during your marriage. It even has an infidelity clause, but it's written in his favor. It states that if you are proven unfaithful, you get nothing. There's no reciprocal clause for him. So he can cheat, and I'm the one who is penalized if I do. Katrina asked, feeling a wave of nausea. Precisely. It's designed to give him all the power. Our only real angle is to prove that you signed it under duress or without adequate legal representation. My lawyer was recommended by his firm, Katrina recalled. And I'm sure they have the paperwork to prove he was independent, Rodriguez countered grimly. They're not sloppy. They will have covered every track. Brenda Holloway will argue that you were an educated woman who signed a binding legal document. She will paint you as a gold digger who is now trying to renege on a deal you happily accepted when times were good. The feeling of hopelessness was suffocating. So what do we do? Rodriguez leaned forward, his expression serious. We fight a war of attrition. We file motions. We demand discovery. We dig into every single financial statement, every corporate entity, every offshore account. A man with this much money always has secrets. He's counting on you to be exhausted, to run out of money, to accept his insulting offer and just go away. We have to prove him wrong. We have to find a lever, something he doesn't want the world to see. The first round of legal skirmishes was brutal. Brenda Holloway filed a motion to have Katrina evicted from the house, claiming her presence was causing emotional distress to Mr. Pratt. She sent aggressive discovery requests demanding years of Katrina's personal bank statements and credit card bills, looking for any purchase that could be spun as profligate or irresponsible. Jameson, meanwhile, was waging a war in the court of public opinion. Anonymous sources began leaking stories to bloggers about Katrina's cold demeanor and extravagant spending. Friends who had once sworn loyalty now crossed the street to avoid her. She was isolated, besieged, and rapidly running out of the funds needed to fight a prolonged legal battle against a billionaire. She was forced to move into the small city condo, a sterile, soulless place that felt more like a hotel than a home. One rainy afternoon, as she was unpacking a box of old books, a wave of dizziness and nausea swept over her. She dismissed it as stress. It had been her constant companion for months. But when it happened again the next day and the day after that, a strange, impossible thought began to take root in her mind. Her hands trembled as she opened the box from the pharmacy. 5 minutes later, she sat on the floor of the cold, unfamiliar bathroom, staring at 2 distinct pink lines. She was pregnant. The news hit her not with joy, but with a complex storm of terror, despair, and a tiny, fiercely protected flicker of something else. Hope. A child. A son or daughter. A part of Jameson, yes, but a part of her, too. This changed everything. He couldn't just discard her now. He couldn't discard his own child. This, she thought, had to be the lever Mr. Rodriguez was looking for. This would force him to be human. She was so tragically, devastatingly wrong. Telling Jameson about the pregnancy was one of the hardest things Katrina had ever had to do. She requested a meeting through their lawyers, a formal, sterile process that underscored the chasm that now lay between them. They met in a neutral conference room at Brenda Holloway's opulent law firm, the city skyline glittering coldly through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Jameson and Brenda sat on one side of the vast, polished table, Katrina and Samuel Rodriguez on the other. Jameson looked bored, impatient, as if he were being kept from a more important meeting. Katrina took a deep breath, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Jameson. She began, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm pregnant. The reaction was not what she had braced herself for. There was no shock, no anger, not even a flicker of the complex emotions she had anticipated. Instead, Brenda Holloway let out a short, derisive laugh. Jameson simply raised an eyebrow, a cruel, calculating smirk forming on his face. "Well, well," he said, leaning back in his chair and steepling his fingers. "How remarkably convenient. Your back is against the wall in a divorce proceeding. The prenup is ironclad, and suddenly you're with child. You must think I'm a fool." The implication was as clear as it was vile. "It's your child," Jameson Katrina said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "We were together. It was the week before you left." "Were we?" Jameson mused, tapping a pen on the table. "I recall that time being quite strained. I recall a great deal of distance between us." He looked directly at her, his eyes devoid of any warmth or history. "Brenda, what's our position on this?" The shark smiled. "Our position, Mr. Pratt, is one of emphatic denial. Mrs. Pratt's claim is self-serving, unsubstantiated, and frankly insulting. It is a transparent and desperate attempt to circumvent a legally binding prenuptial agreement. We formally contest the paternity of this alleged child." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. He wasn't just denying the baby. He was accusing her of infidelity, the one thing the prenup was designed to punish her for. He was using her own miracle against her, twisting it into a weapon to destroy her completely. "You know I was never with anyone else," Katrina whispered, the horror of his strategy dawning on her. "You know this." "I know no such thing," Jameson said coolly. "You were unhappy. You were lonely. Who knows what you did to console yourself? It's of no consequence to me. The child is not mine." Samuel Rodriguez slammed his hand on the table, his composure finally breaking. "This is an outrage. We will submit to a paternity test immediately. A simple DNA test will prove you are the father." Brenda Holloway was ready for that. "Of course," she said smoothly. "After the child is born, we will not be rushed into validating this transparent ploy. We will agree to a court-ordered, legally binding DNA test performed by a neutral third party once the birth has occurred. Until then, we consider this matter a malicious fabrication." Katrina finally understood. It wasn't just about denying the baby. It was about the timing. He was going to drag this out for months. He would allow her to go through the pregnancy alone under a cloud of public suspicion that he would gleefully fan. He would let the world believe she was an unfaithful, lying gold digger who had gotten pregnant by another man to trap her wealthy husband. The humiliation would be relentless, public, and absolute. The meeting ended. As Katrina walked out, her body trembling, she felt Jameson's eyes on her. It wasn't a look of hatred. It was a look of victory. He had found a way to crush what little spirit she had left. The months that followed were a living nightmare. Just as she had predicted, the narrative leaked to the press. Anonymous, friends of Mr. Pratt expressed his deep personal pain and betrayal over his wife's shocking infidelity. Blog posts speculated on the identity of the real father. She became a pariah. When she went to the grocery store, people would whisper and point. The stress was immense, and her doctor warned her about the potential effects on the baby. Her only sanctuary was her small circle of loyal friends like Maria and the steadfast support of Samuel Rodriguez. He insulated her from the worst of the legal attacks and focused on his own strategy. "He's overplaying his hand," Katrina Rodriguez told her during one of their weekly meetings. "This level of cruelty, this public denial, it shows a profound arrogance. He believes he is untouchable. People like that make mistakes. We're still digging into the financials. We're going to find something." Katrina gave birth to a healthy baby boy in the dead of winter. She named him Leo. As she held him in her arms in the quiet hospital room, the world outside, with its lawyers and accusations, faded away. He was perfect. He had her eyes but a tiny cleft in his chin that was unmistakably Jameson's. He was the living, breathing proof of her truth. The love she felt for him was a fierce, protective inferno, burning away the despair and leaving behind a core of pure, unyielding steel. She was no longer just fighting for herself. She was fighting for her son. 2 weeks after Leo's birth, a court-appointed nurse arrived at the condo to take a DNA sample. A simple, painless swab from inside Leo's cheek, and another from a grim-faced Jameson Pratt at a separate location. The samples were sealed, documented, and sent to a court-approved lab. The results would be delivered directly to the presiding judge in their divorce case, Judge Anya Sharma. The court date was set for 6 weeks later. In that time, Jameson's camp was silent. They had made their accusation. Now they were content to let her dangle, waiting for the public verdict. Jameson and Giselle, however, were more visible than ever. They announced their engagement in a lavish magazine spread. The article painted Jameson as a resilient victim who had found true love after a painful betrayal. Giselle was quoted as saying, "Jameson has the biggest heart. To see him hurt like this has been devastating. But we are moving forward stronger than ever." Katrina read the article, her stomach twisting. But as she looked at Leo sleeping peacefully in his crib, the anger didn't consume her. It fueled her. She was ready for court. She was ready for the truth to finally come out. She thought she knew what the climax of her story would be, the moment the DNA results were read, vindicating her and shaming Jameson. She had no idea that the real bombshell, the one Samuel Rodriguez had been quietly, painstakingly assembling, was something far more devastating. The DNA test was just the primer. The real explosion was yet to come. The week leading up to the court date was a study in contrasts. Jameson Pratt's life, as portrayed in the media, was a whirlwind of success and celebration. He closed a multi-billion-dollar merger, cementing his company's dominance in the tech sector. He and Giselle were the toast of the town, photographed at the opera, their heads together, whispering and laughing. The narrative was set. Jameson Pratt, the brilliant wronged husband, was rising from the ashes of a toxic marriage, his beautiful and intelligent fiancée by his side. Katrina's life, by contrast, was silent and circumscribed. It revolved around the quiet rhythms of a newborn, 3 a.m. feedings, diaper changes, and the soft gurgles of a sleeping baby. The city condo, once a symbol of her exile, had become a sanctuary. She'd shut out the world, unsubscribed from the gossip sites, and stopped reading the papers. Her entire universe had shrunk to the 10-pound life form cradled in her arms. This quiet, insulated life gave her a strange and unexpected clarity. The mansion, the parties, the social status, they all seemed like a hollow dream. The only thing that felt real was the unconditional love she felt for her son. Samuel Rodriguez called her 2 days before the hearing. His voice was different. It had lost its usual weary tone and was replaced by a low, humming intensity. "Katrina, I need you to be prepared for Tuesday," he said. "Things may get intense." "I'm ready for the DNA results, Samuel. I've been ready for months." "It's more than that," he said, a deliberate pause in his voice. "The financials came through. We had to subpoena a very specific set of records from an investment bank in the Cayman Islands. It took months to cut through the red tape. But we got them. And we found something." "What did you find?" she asked, her heart beginning to beat faster. "I can't discuss the specifics over the phone. But I want you to remember this: Jameson's greatest weakness is his ego. He believes he's the smartest man in any room. He planned his divorce from you like a corporate takeover with meticulous attention to every detail of the prenup. But he got arrogant. He made a mistake. A big one. A mistake. He hid something. Rodriguez said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Something he never ever wanted you to find. Something that changes the entire landscape of this case. Just stay calm in court. Let me handle the talking. No matter what Brenda Holloway says, no matter how much Jameson smirks you, just focus on the judge. Trust me. The ominous yet hopeful nature of his call left Katrina unsettled. What could be bigger than the public denial of his own son? She tried to imagine what it could be, hidden money, a secret business deal. But her mind, exhausted from months of stress and sleepless nights, couldn't grasp it. She decided to put her faith in Rodriguez. She had nothing else left. The morning of the court date, she dressed with deliberate care. She didn't choose a power suit or a statement dress. She wore a simple charcoal grey dress, tailored and modest. She wore her hair pulled back in a simple chignon and applied only a touch of makeup. She didn't want to look like a victim, nor did she want to look like a fighter. She wanted to look like what she was, a mother, a woman who had been pushed to the edge and had found a quiet dignity there. Maria came over to watch Leo. As Katrina kissed her sleeping son goodbye, she whispered, "This is for you. I'm doing this for you." Walking into the courthouse was like running a gauntlet. A small pack of photographers had been tipped off, and their flashes exploded in her face. Their questions shouted like accusations. "Katrina, is it true you're demanding 50 million? Who's the baby's real father, Kat?" She kept her eyes forward, her expression serene, and walked through the doors without a word. Inside the courtroom was a sterile, impersonal space of polished wood and fluorescent lighting. But the tension made the air feel thick and heavy. She took her seat beside Samuel Rodriguez. He gave her hand a reassuring squeeze under the table. A moment later, the doors opened again, and a murmur went through the small public gallery. Jameson Pratt entered, and it was pure theatre. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, looking less like a man at a divorce hearing, and more like a CEO about to ring the opening bell on Wall Street. On his arm was Giselle Dubois, dressed in a sharp, cream-colored Chanel suit. They were a vision of power, wealth, and utter confidence. They didn't look like they were in a legal battle. They looked like they were attending their own coronation. Jameson caught Katrina's eye from across the room. He gave her that small, dismissive smile she'd come to loathe. It was a smile that said, "You lose. Look at me, look at her. We are the future. You are nothing." Giselle sat in the front row of the gallery, directly in Katrina's line of sight, a strategic power move. She crossed her legs, smoothed her skirt, and fixed her gaze on Jameson with an expression of pure adoration. Brenda Holloway arrived and conferred with her client in low, confident whispers. The whole tableau was designed to intimidate, to project an aura of absolute invincibility. And to Katrina's horror, she felt a familiar knot of fear tightening in her stomach. What if Rodriguez was wrong? What if their secret weapon was a dud? Against this display of overwhelming force, she felt small and powerless all over again. Then the bailiff's voice cut through the tension. "All rise." Judge Anya Sharma entered the room. She was a petite woman in her late 50s, with sharp, intelligent eyes behind a pair of no-nonsense glasses. She moved with an economy of motion that commanded respect. She didn't look at the plaintiffs or the defendants. She sat opened a file in front of her and looked out over the courtroom. Her gaze was impartial, unreadable, and utterly in charge. "We are here today to adjudicate the divorce proceedings of Pratt versus Pratt." She began, her voice calm and clear. I have reviewed the preliminary motions, the financial disclosures, and the matter of the contested paternity. We will address the paternity issue first, as it has a material bearing on other aspects of this case. Mr. Pratt, Miss Holloway, you contested the paternity of the child Leo Pratt. The court ordered a DNA test. The results were delivered to my chambers yesterday afternoon. She picked up a single manila folder. The folder, the one Katrina knew, contained her vindication. Jameson leaned back in his chair, the picture of nonchalance. He even shot a small conspiratorial wink at Giselle. He was treating the entire proceeding as a tiresome formality. He had built a narrative of her infidelity, and in his mind, the legal system was just another stage on which to perform his version of the truth. He was confident that even if the child was his, he could spin it. He would claim he had been temporarily misled, that Katrina had been manipulative, that his initial doubts were justified. He would apologize handsomely, paint himself as a man who had been driven to suspicion by a deceitful wife, and still come out the hero. His arrogance was a shield, and he thought it was impenetrable. Judge Sharma opened the folder. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint rustle of paper in her hands. According to the certified report from the DNA Diagnostics Center, the judge said her eyes, scanning the page, the probability of paternity for the tested father, Mr. Jameson Pratt, in relation to the child Leo Pratt, is... She paused, looking up from the paper and fixing her gaze directly on Jameson. His smirk faltered for the first time. 99.999%. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Katrina closed her eyes, a single hot tear of relief tracing a path down her cheek. Vindicated. Finally. Samuel Rodriguez put a calming hand on her arm. "Stay with me," he whispered. "This is just the beginning." Jameson, for his part, quickly recovered. He turned to Brenda Holloway, feigning surprise and a sort of pained relief. He was already preparing his next performance, the relieved father wronged, but willing to forgive. But Judge Sharma hadn't put the folder down. She wasn't finished. Well, Brenda Holloway began rising to her feet. "My client is obviously shocked and relieved by this news. He had been given cause to believe otherwise, Your Honor. But he will, of course, embrace his responsibilities." "Sit down, Miss Holloway," the judge said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. The command was so sharp, so unexpected, that Holloway froze her mouth slightly agape before slowly sinking back into her chair. The judge's gaze was now fixed hard and unyielding on Jameson Pratt. "Mr. Pratt," she said, the calm in her voice making it all the more menacing. "Your performance is very convincing, but we have another matter to discuss. A matter that arose from Mr. Rodriguez's discovery motions regarding your financial assets, specifically the ones you failed to disclose to this court." Jameson's face, which had been a mask of feigned relief, now went rigid. The smirk was gone, replaced by a stony, guarded expression. "Your Honor, I have disclosed all my assets. My financials are an open book, are they?" Judge Sharma replied, a dangerous glint in her eye. "Because what we discovered, Mr. Pratt, is that it's not the books you keep open that are the problem. It's the ones you try to keep permanently sealed." She slid another document out from under the first one. "This, Mr. Pratt, is the paperwork for a blind trust. One you established 3 years ago. A trust funded with $5 million in seed money, now worth substantially more. A trust you conveniently failed to list in your financial affidavits." Brenda Holloway was on her feet again. "Your Honor, this is an ambush. We haven't seen this document. A blind trust for investment purposes is perfectly legal and often not considered a marital asset. It is considered a marital asset when it was funded with marital earnings, Ms. Holloway. and it is most certainly of interest to this court. The judge countered her voice like ice, especially when we consider the name of the trust's sole beneficiary. She let the silence hang in the air for a beat, her eyes boring into Jameson, who was now ashen-faced. The beneficiary of your secret multi-million-dollar trust, Mr. Pratt, Judge Sharma, declared to the stunned courtroom, is a 3-year-old child, a little girl named Sophie. She paused again, letting the name sink in. Then she delivered the final, devastating blow. Sophie Dubois. The name hung in the air like poison gas. Sophie Dubois. A wave of confusion rippled through the gallery, followed by a dawning, horrified understanding. All eyes swiveled from the judge to Jameson, then to Giselle Dubois in the front row. Her perfectly composed mask of serene adoration shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Her face went slack with shock, her skin turning a ghastly shade of white. Her eyes were wide with a terror that was part exposure, part betrayal. Jameson Pratt looked like he had been physically struck. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and fragile beneath his expensive suit. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The invincible titan of industry, the man who controlled every room he entered, had been rendered mute. He was for the first time in his adult life utterly and completely powerless. Katrina stared, her mind struggling to process the information. A child, a 3-year-old daughter. He hadn't just been having an affair for the last 2 years. He had been living a complete double life. He had another family. While she was hosting his dinner parties and managing their home, he was providing for a secret child with his mistress. The lie wasn't a recent development. It was a deep, foundational part of their marriage. The cruelty of it was staggering. He had publicly accused her of infidelity, of trying to trap him with a child that wasn't his, all while he was hiding a child of his own. His righteous indignation, his performance as the wronged husband, it was all a monstrous, cynical lie designed to cover his own deeper, more profound deceit. Judge Sharma was relentless. She held up a third document. Given the establishment of this secret trust for a non-marital child, the court felt it was prudent to seek clarification. We issued a second sealed order, Mr. Pratt, an order for a DNA test for Sophie Dubois. Giselle let out a small, strangled sob. This was a detail even she hadn't anticipated. She had been betrayed just as surely as Katrina. Jameson had kept her and their child a convenient funded secret, but had clearly never intended for them to become a legitimate part of his public life. She was a pawn in his game, and she was only now realizing it. The results of that test are also here. The judge continued, her voice ringing with the clear, cold authority of absolute justice. They confirm with 99.99999% probability that you, Mr. Jameson Pratt, are the father of Sophie Dubois. The courtroom erupted into a cacophony of frantic whispers. Brenda Holloway was frantically whispering to Jameson, who seemed unable to hear her, his eyes locked on the judge in abject horror. "Let me be clear for the record," Judge Sharma said, her voice rising above the din, silencing the room once more. While married to Mrs. Katrina Pratt, Mr. Jameson Pratt fathered a child with Ms. Giselle Dubois. He then concealed the existence of this child and hid millions of dollars of marital assets in a trust for her benefit. When his wife, Mrs. Pratt, became pregnant with his legal heir, he publicly and maliciously denied paternity, accusing her of the very infidelity he himself had been committing for years. She closed the folder with a sharp, final snap. This constitutes financial fraud against the court and against Mrs. Pratt. It demonstrates a pattern of deceit that is frankly shocking in its scope and cruelty. It renders the infidelity clause of the prenuptial agreement, the one that only penalizes Mrs. Pratt, I might add, null and void. In fact, given the evidence of fraud and bad faith, I am inclined to rule that the entire prenuptial agreement is unenforceable." Brenda Holloway shot to her feet. "Your Honor, we object. This is a gross overreach. Your client has committed perjury on his financial affidavits." Ms. Holloway. Judge Sharma snapped back her eyes, flashing with anger. "He has perpetrated a fraud upon this court. If I were you, I would advise him to stop digging the hole he is in before this moves from a family court matter to a criminal one. Sit down." Holloway, looking as stunned as her client, sank back into her seat, defeated. The judge's gaze then softened just for a moment as she looked at Katrina. For the first time, she saw her not as a plaintiff, but as a woman, a mother who had endured an unimaginable betrayal. "Mrs. Pratt," she said, her voice now quiet but firm, "this court will not allow you to be victimized any further. We are setting aside the prenuptial agreement. All assets acquired during the 10 years of your marriage will be considered marital property, subject to a 50-50 division. This includes the current valuation of Mr. Pratt's company stock, acquired during that time, all real estate, and of course the full contents of the Dubois Trust." The numbers were astronomical. It wasn't $1 million. It was closer to $250 million. Furthermore, the judge continued, her eyes shifting back to the pale, sweating man opposite. "Katrina, child support will be calculated for your son, Leo Pratt, based on your true income, and it will be retroactive to his date of birth. Full custody will be awarded to Mrs. Pratt. You will, of course, have visitation rights should you choose to be a father to the son you so callously denied." Jameson finally broke. He slumped forward, putting his head in his hands. The smirk, the confidence, the arrogance, it had all been stripped away, leaving behind a hollow, defeated man. He hadn't just lost half his fortune, he had lost control. His meticulously crafted world, built on lies and manipulation, had been brought crashing down by a quiet librarian, a methodical lawyer, and a judge who believed in the truth. In the front row, Giselle Dubois began to weep, not quiet, dignified tears, but ugly, gasping sobs of a woman whose entire future had just been publicly dismantled. Her dream of becoming the next Mrs. Pratt had evaporated. She was now just the other woman, the mother of the secret child, a co-conspirator in a fraud she hadn't even fully understood. Katrina watched the scene unfold, but she felt no glee, no triumphant joy. She felt a profound and weary sense of release. It was the feeling of a heavy weight, one she had been carrying for years, finally being lifted from her shoulders. She looked at Samuel Rodriguez, and he gave her a slow, respectful nod. They had done it. They had found the cannon. She stood up, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt tall. She didn't look at Jameson. She didn't look at Giselle. She looked straight ahead at the doors at the back of the courtroom. She turned and walked out her steps, steady and sure, leaving the wreckage of Jameson Pratt's life behind her. She had a son to get home to. The fallout from the courtroom detonation was immediate and spectacular. The story was too juicy, too dramatic to be contained. It wasn't just society gossip, it was front-page news. Tech titan's secret family exposed in court, screamed one headline. Pratt Empire crumbles under lies, read another. The narrative Jameson had so carefully constructed was obliterated overnight. He was no longer the wronged visionary. He was a fraudulent, adulterous villain. His company's stock took a significant hit as the board of directors scrambled to manage the PR nightmare. Morality clauses were invoked. Partners became nervous. The carefully polished image of Pratt Industries, an image Katrina had spent a decade helping to build, was now irrevocably tarnished by its founder's hubris. Jameson retreated from public life, hounded by the paparazzi he had once courted. His relationship with Giselle, built on a transactional dream of power and status, predictably imploded under the weight of public scrutiny and mutual recriminations. She sued him for child support for Sophie, and their battles became another sordid public spectacle. He was now tethered to two women he despised, forced to fund the lives of two children who represented his greatest failures. His vast fortune, once a symbol of his power, now felt like a cage, its bars forged from his own deceit. For Katrina, the aftermath was the polar opposite. The settlement, once finalized, was staggering. The numbers were so large they felt abstract, unreal. But the true wealth she had gained had nothing to do with the money that flowed into her new accounts. Her first act was to disappear. She and Leo left Austin. She bought a sprawling, understated farmhouse in the rolling hills of Vermont, a place of quiet beauty and 4 distinct seasons. It was a world away from the glass and steel modernity of her former life. The house had a library with a fireplace, a rambling garden, and acres of land for Leo to one day explore. She reconnected with the person she had been before Jameson Pratt, Katrina Davenport. She read voraciously. She took up gardening, finding a simple, profound satisfaction in nurturing life from the soil. She made friends with her neighbors, a baker, a retired professor, a veterinarian, people who knew nothing of her past and cared only for her kindness and quiet humor. Her life was no longer about performance. It was about presence. It was about being present for Leo's first smile, his first steps, his first words. It was about quiet mornings, with a cup of tea and a good book, and evenings spent watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Samuel Rodriguez visited her about a year after the divorce was finalized. They sat on her porch watching Leo chase butterflies in the grass. "You seem happy, Katrina," he said, a genuine smile on his face. "I am," she replied, and the truth of it filled her with a quiet warmth. "I thought for years that happiness was about having everything. The perfect house, the perfect husband, the perfect life. But it's not. It's about having enough. And this," she said, gesturing to the peaceful scene around her, "this is more than enough." She never spoke of Jameson with bitterness. In her mind, he had become a lesson, a painful, costly lesson about the difference between value and price, between image and integrity. He had taught her that a person's true worth isn't measured by their bank balance, but by their capacity for truth and compassion. By that measure, he was the poorest man she had ever known. She used her fortune thoughtfully. She established a foundation that provided grants to underfunded public libraries and created scholarships for young women pursuing degrees in library sciences. It was a quiet, impactful philanthropy, a stark contrast to the self-aggrandizing charity balls of her past. She was giving back to the world she had come from, the world that had first given her solace and strength. Sometimes a headline would cross her path: Jameson Pratt in another legal battle, his company's value slowly eroding his name, now synonymous with scandal. She felt a faint, distant pity for him, the kind one might feel for a tragic character in a novel. His was a self-inflicted wound, a prison of his own making. Katrina's freedom, on the other hand, was absolute. It wasn't the freedom to buy anything she wanted, but the freedom to be anyone she chose. And she chose to be a mother, a philanthropist, a reader, a gardener, a woman at peace. She had walked into that courtroom a broken wife, but she had walked out a whole person. She had lost a gilded cage, and in its place had found an entire world. And in the quiet, happy laughter of her son, she found a fortune more valuable than any Jameson Pratt could ever comprehend. The story of Katrina Pratt is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply buried, has a way of fighting its way to the surface. It shows that integrity and resilience can be a force more powerful than any amount of wealth or influence. Jameson Pratt walked into that courtroom with a smile, believing he had already won. But he forgot that the one thing you can't control is the truth, and sometimes it comes in the form of a simple piece of paper in a judge's hand. Her victory wasn't just about the money. It was about reclaiming her story, her dignity, and her future. If this story of justice and empowerment resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We have many more true-life stories coming your way, tales of betrayal, resilience, and the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. Click that notification bell so you never miss a single one. Thank you for listening.